Welcome back everybody to another episode of Direct Comparison. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at the PC beta for Bethesda's upcoming multiplayer-focused Fallout 76, and see how it compares visually to its 2015 counterpart, Fallout 4. Bear in mind that Fallout 76 is still currently in a beta state, and could potentially improve before its final release later this month. Any bugs or glitches, for example, could possibly be ironed out, and performance and visual problems are also subject to change. I'll also be doing an updated comparison when we receive the final build of the game, just in case there were any substantial changes. For the sake of this comparison, both games are being run on the PC platform, with the graphics cranked up to their highest values, minus the weapon debris setting, which seems to be causing constant crashes in Fallout 4 now. Both games are also being run at a 1440p resolution at an unlocked frame rate. To kick this comparison off, let's first look at the default character models in both games. Now, I tried to get the 76 character to somewhat match my default character from Fallout 4, but I think I made the 76 guy a bit chubby. Either way, we can obviously see a difference here in the actual Vault-Tec jumpsuit, which in Fallout 4 had a much tighter design, with a lot of fine, tiny details. Fallout 76 looks like a cheap mechanic's suit by comparison, and fits much looser. It's difficult to really say one looks better than the other because of this obvious cosmetic change, but I will say that the details appear sharper and cleaner in Fallout 4, with Fallout 76 coming off as a bit blurry. I also noticed a slight variation in the way the characters moved. I'm going to need to test this more carefully when I get the full game, but you can still get an idea of what I mean from this footage here. I think the biggest difference isn't as much the character animation itself, but more in how the player controls their direction in third person. In Fallout 4, you could rotate the character independently of the character's direction. In Fallout 76, however, your character will travel in the direction that you're looking. Both options function fine, and you can still rotate the camera in Fallout 76 by holding down the view switch button while moving either the mouse or the joystick, but it's interesting nonetheless. Next up, let's check out some environmental texture work. I was actually pretty surprised by this one. Fallout 76, despite early reports of it looking much worse than Fallout 4, actually sports some higher resolution textures in the environment. Things like the dirt here look sharper in 76, and feature a little bit more detail. The grass, as many of you likely already noticed, is much greener in Fallout 76, mainly because the West Virginia area wasn't hit nearly as hard by the nuclear fallout as Boston in Fallout 4. The world of Fallout 76 is filled with lush trees and rolling green hills, but at the same time, still features the same ruined structures and atmosphere fans have come to expect from the franchise. Fallout 76 does this very strange thing with its depth of field, where the world is blurred out past only a few meters. Fallout 4 didn't feature this level of depth of field, and because of this, the world of Fallout 4 looks much more realistic. My guess is Fallout 76's multiplayer features are putting a substantial strain on the engine, and by limiting the player's view distance, the game will run more stable. Moving on from textures, we have lighting effects. These don't seem to have changed much between the two titles. Fallout 4 may not have been the prettiest game when it released in 2015, but it did have some nice lighting effects, especially the dynamic god rays. Bloom effects weren't blown out of proportion and appeared naturally, and most outdoor scenes look decent. Fallout 76 doesn't seem to have changed any of this and appears just as good, if not better, thanks to its more colorful landscape. God rays look fantastic, and the dynamic weather and fog helps these effects to stand out even more. Shadows do appear to have received a slight downgrade to quality. Rather than the realistic, soft-edged shadows of Fallout 4, Fallout 76 seems to opt for a much sharper appearance. Fallout 4's biggest performance-related issues were directly caused by the world's dynamic shadow effects, especially in the more dense urban environments. Reducing the quality of the shadows and possibly reducing the shadow render distance will likely help to alleviate some of the problems. I also noticed some very low shadow filtering distances, which can be a bit distracting. Moving on, we have our special effects. Again, I want to expand on this comparison in the future and include more categories like water effects, but for now, I have some weapon muzzle flash comparisons, along with some explosions. Much like the lighting effects, not much has changed here in Fallout 76. The sprite used for the initial shot for the pipe pistol, for example, looks practically identical, outside of a different color design. However, there is one very tiny detail you may not have noticed at first. In Fallout 76, there is no longer a bullet casing leaving the pipe pistol after firing. This also appears to be the case with the bolt-action hunting rifle. This seems like an odd omission, and for now, I'm going to assume it's a smaller detail that will be implemented in the final build of the game, as I don't see how this could dramatically hurt performance in any way. The game's fire effects seem to be exactly the same between games, down to the identical timing and smoke effects, suggesting that the effect was likely brought directly over from Fallout 4 without any adjustments. The same seems to be true for explosive effects, including standard frag grenades, and of course, the nuclear vehicle explosions. These effects match perfectly outside of a few coloration and lighting differences. Finally, let's wrap up by briefly listening to some comparisons between various weapons in both games. Did Fallout 76's sound improve, or did it sound better in Fallout 4? And that wraps up this episode of Direct Comparison. Fallout 76 doesn't appear to be as downgraded as people say. There's definitely some issues with it, especially the odd LODs and depth of field effects, in addition to some missing bullet casings. And of course, a ton of broken, glitchy gameplay. But things like textures seem to have been improved upon, and a lot of the nicer effects from Fallout 4 like lighting and explosions seem to be completely identical. Thank you all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Direct Comparison. If you want to learn more about Fallout, be sure to check out the detailed History of Fallout video linked at the end. And don't forget to keep it tuned to my channel for more comparisons, a detailed review, and more in the coming weeks. And if you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos posted every week.